Very good afternoon here in England. And is it a good morning to you, Phoebe, over there in the US?
It is. Yes, we're at about 10 o'clock over here. And I've heard that it's way sunnier in England than it is in America right now.
Yeah, for once we can say it absolutely is a beautiful day here. But to those who are just tuning in on YouTube, welcome, good afternoon, and thanks to Phoebe Schecter who's joined us to talk everything about her career as an athlete and also her career as a coach as well. I'm also joined by Semi Phillips, who you can see there in the top right-hand corner, who is head of elite coaching in our high performance program. So yeah, Phoebe, thank you for joining Sammy and I this afternoon.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. It's been cool to kind of see what a lot of the similarities are between rugby and American football. And I think it's kind of been just as much of a learning journey for me so far as hopefully it is for you guys as well.
Awesome, thank you. So I wonder if you could just tell us a little bit about how you got into your career as an athlete.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously with my accent, I am American by birth, but my mom is British. So she's from Stoke, which has allowed me to have dual citizenship. Growing up in the States, I've always worked with horses. That's been my full-time life passion and really what I thought I'd be doing forever. And it wasn't until I actually came to visit my gran in England, who suggested that I should see what my opportunities are worldwide. And ended up applying for a job with a gentleman on the Dutch Olympic team with 3-day eventing with horses, based in Cheshire. Got the job, crazy enough. And for me, that was probably the most life-changing moment I had. It was right after the London 2012 Olympics. So I thought, what an incredible guy to work for. And because I started working for him, that's when I got involved in sports as almost like a byproduct. So essentially, I was looking for a way to meet people and get a bit of American culture, and just happened to see an ad on social media for American football. And I always say this, but I think when you're kind of out of your comfort zone, you're so much more willing to take risks. And for me, that's what happened. So I went and trialed for a contact sport, which I had never played contact sport in my life. And it was the best decision I've ever made. And that's really how my journey as an athlete started. I got involved in American football then, starting off with the contact side, but actually flag football or non-contact version was pretty much parallel to that. And even through American football, I got involved in kabaddi through a girl from New Zealand who was playing over here in the UK. So all of that just based off of the fact that I moved to a new country, which is still kind of crazy to me, to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely. And ironically, not sports that are obviously, known over here as well. So, you leave the US where that kind of thing's probably more common and come over here, it's always the way. I wonder if you could just tell us a little bit then how you got into coaching as well.
Yeah, so I knew that, I was 22 when I moved over to the UK and that age when I started playing sport. And in my head, and I think this is kind of a taboo thing that maybe when you're younger, everyone seems older anyways, but you think, oh, I can't be playing sport when I'm later in life. And which obviously is not the case at all. But I just I knew I couldn't play forever. So I thought, how can I still be involved in sport? And how can I make it so that I'm essentially giving back to the sport that's offered me so much? American football changed my life. And so I got involved in coaching, and I started coaching youth because I thought it was probably the best way that I could feel confident in terms of teaching younger people. It was more the fundamentals and things that I knew that I knew. So I didn't feel like I was putting myself out too much. And that was really how it started, was with the youth, getting involved that way. But I just fell in love with it. And it came to the point where actually I worked for the gentleman with the horses for a year and then had a total career change because I knew that I wanted to make my life about sport now. And yes, horses are, of course, they're a sport, but I wanted to make it specifically about American football. So that's when I got more involved into the strength and conditioning side, because I thought, well, I can help with American football. I can help with kabaddi. Like selfishly, I can learn about myself and improve myself in that way. So I just did a 180 and then consciously made a decision that I'm going to make sport my priority. And that started with my career, but also started with then coaching and eventually growing and being able to coach in the NFL level really within only like a 3-year period from knowing nothing about American football, because I didn't really follow it in the States, to then being able to be at the highest level, which still seems quite mad.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that.
You play a lot of sports at elite level, like an insane number of sports at elite level. How do you balance that with your coaching as well?
Yeah, and it's a good question, because even balancing the different sports, they do require different elements of fitness as well. And trying to make that work in a week is not always ideal. But I think coaching and probably even more so now, it's really proven through everything we can do online. There's so much self-development that we can do. Time-wise, it's all about preparation, especially as a coach. How can I make sure that I'm as prepared as possible and that my players are prepared as possible? So it's been a really positive thing in terms of making me really evaluate how I can get across the most important information as efficiently as possible. But how can I make sure that they're prepared for practice? Can I show them the drills, via video during the week ahead of time, so that way, when we get to practice, it's like they've already seen it and done it before. But when coaching with the Bills, I mean, that was so intensive in terms of time. There really was, it pretty much took away my opportunity to play as an athlete, because it's just so full on. But that's probably the only time that I've really had that struggle of being an athlete and a coach.
You just mentioned there your coaching career in the NFL with Buffalo Bills. I mean, that is such an achievement. How can you tell us what a typical day coaching with the Buffalo Bills would be like?
Yeah, definitely. I'll kind of give you like a week overview to then minimize it to one day, just so at least we have an idea, because it is full time. You are pretty much, you are 7 days a week, but you're pretty much from end of July through till December in terms of season. So like if Sunday we play, then Monday players are in and you review. Tuesday players aren't in the building. That's their day off. Wednesday we have walkthroughs in practice. Thursday, same thing. Friday, same thing. Saturday we do walkthroughs in the morning, and then we usually fly if we're going to an away game, or if we're home, we still have our meetings in the morning and at night. So if we break that down into a typical day, one where there's practice is always more interesting. But every morning get there at about 5:15. If I am awake enough at that hour, I will go and try and do my workout then, because personally I found that even if it's just 20 minutes, that is my time to kind of feel good about myself and mentally kind of prepare myself as well. So get in there, get breakfast, usually eating at the desk, because you have to get everything prepped for your meetings, because we'll have our like offensive staff meeting at 6:30. Then we're going in and meeting with our positional groups. So for me, it's tight end. So we meet with them. Then we've got our actual whole team meeting, and that occurs at 7:30. And then I don't know if you guys know, we've got a couple different elements to football. So then we'll go into special teams, which is like your kicking teams and all of that. And then we'll do offense and defense. Then we go into walkthroughs, back, prepare. Guys get like 30 minutes to get a break and eat something. Practice is then 2 hours. We get all the game footage from practice, and we break it down, watch that during lunch as coaching staff. So then we go back and review all the film from practice with, we go special teams, offense and defense, positional groups. By then it's 5:30. We have our staff meeting. Players can go home. And then now we're prepping for whoever we're playing next. So we'll usually be there on average to about 11:30. But I mean, there's been mornings where we've been there till 2 a.m. prepping, and then you're back in at 5 again. So it's a bit crazy and full on.
Absolutely crazy and full on. Yeah, just an insane day. And I mean, I take it that's why the season is just so concentrated. Almost you couldn't make that any longer, could you?
No, exactly. And really, I think the hardest bit is for the players to, if you're playing, I don't know, New England Patriots on Sunday, well, we have a 24-hour rule in our building where you have 24 hours to think about that game, to fix your mistakes or correct whatever you need to. But then you have to forget about it, because now on Tuesday, Wednesday, you only have 3-4 days to prepare for your next team. And that cycle keeps going. So mentally, the capacity is just not there, because you play so many different teams throughout a season. I think if you extended that, I think, yes, you'd get burnout, but you'd also, I think, you'd start mixing one team into another.
Yeah, absolutely. So, look, I mean, you've achieved so lot already in your coaching career, and some of the roles you've had have just been phenomenal. Look, I'm sure there's been quite a few barriers to that and challenges. I wonder if you could sort of give us a little bit of insight into sort of what those barriers and challenges might have been, and obviously how you've overcome them.
Yeah, so I can probably think of a few examples, and even one of them goes back to when I first started playing this sport. I think because I have an American accent, people think I can just throw the ball. I wish I had that skill set attached with my accent, but so when I first trialed for GB, I was put at quarterback. And I mean, luckily, we had someone way better than me come in who could actually throw the ball. And when she came in, I was kind of faced with a decision from our head coach at the time of, like, you can either, find another position or you're not going to make the squad. And for me, something that I had at that time already started planning my life around, it was a really big situation for me, because I could either have just left or I could have pushed myself to find something new. And that's where I really found linebacker, where you essentially just hit people, which is terrific. But, and that was probably one of my first challenges within sport. And it seems little in hindsight, but actually was a really big kind of driver for me going forwards. So then when I got into, I guess a few years down the line, again, playing, and it kind of was an interesting one, because we talk about multi-sports and how positive it can be. And I'm such a big supporter of multi-sports. But I went through a really weird phase where I'd been out playing in India with kabaddi for months. And the tackling is similar, but not really similar, because you're also bringing in like BJJ, like MMA style moves and grappling. And so when I went back to American football and started tackling again, it was like I couldn't switch my brain back to American football tackling. And yes, there are similarities, definitely, but I found that as a player, I just felt like I could never get it right. And it was really frustrating for me, where I was like, why am I even playing this sport? I can't seem to be good at this at all. And it was, a really kind of big funk for me. And it took a few months for me to really kind of push through and actually get back to tackling right. And, for us, we're amateur sports. You only have such limited time with your coaches. But I just thought, I can only do so much. And especially in team sport, it can't just be about you and what your needs are. So there was a lot of work I had to put in outside of it regarding my tackling and regarding kind of my angles that really helped build me back up and really boost my confidence again. And then kind of the final stage to that is getting into coaching and especially coaching at the higher levels in college and in the NFL. I think there's two things to it. I think one is, whether as an athlete or as a coach, truly believing in yourself. It is so hard for someone else to fully believe in you when you're always kind of holding yourself back like that and never fully kind of jumping in the pool. And learning to kind of have faith and believe in myself was key, because I later realized, especially when I was in the NFL, that I had these feelings that I later could identify as imposter syndrome. So essentially, feeling like, oh, you're just lucky, you just got there because of, you applied to something, or, it wasn't me. And I know a lot of us still say, like, oh, I was really lucky that this happened, or, I was so fortunate I knew this person. But, there is that element to it. And there is, probably a little bit of luck that comes with it. But you still had to work to put yourself in those spaces, and you still had to show up every day. And when you get invited back, it's your work ethic that speaks for you. And maybe these opportunities are opened for you, but if you don't then perform after that, then yeah, maybe you can claim it as luck. But for a lot of us that are in the roles we're in now, and definitely speaking for myself, when I got asked to be back for the season with Buffalo and back with training camp, it was kind of a wake-up call for me where I was like, you know what, actually, I belong here and I've earned my way to be here. And that was a really big moment for me. And I think that overcoming that barrier and it kind of then helped me understand what value I brought to a team. I think all those pieces came together really nicely. But the first step of that was definitely believing in myself. Then kind of, going through the confidence of realizing I earned it there and then understanding my value. So the barriers that we kind of talk about, mine were all barriers that I put on myself. It was nothing anyone else did. It was me and how I viewed myself in these situations.
It's really interesting. Yeah. My next question is two parts. So I'll start with the first part and then we can move into the second. But we've mentioned the sort of GB women's team and things like that. Could you just tell us a little bit about, where that's taken you, what competitions you've been in?
Yeah. So, and this is the beauty of sport, right? Like we get to travel the world and get involved in other cultures. It's so cool. So with the women, we've traveled to Spain. We've competed now in 2 Euros, a Worlds. We'll have another Worlds next year. So we've been to Canada. We've played teams like Russia and Italy and Canada and USA and Mexico. Just some really incredible teams. And I think it's been really interesting, at least from our sport. I've kind of been a part of it in the UK from the beginning, just by chance. So to see the growth where we started at 5-a-side as our national program to now being able to actually play full 11-a-side with special teams, that's been great in its own right. And it's actually been kind of cool because teams like Sweden, they actually helped us in the beginning. They were like, okay, well, we play 11-a-side here, but if you don't have that opportunity, we'll cut our squad down to 5-a-side and play you guys in 5-a-side. So that camaraderie that we've had between countries has been pretty cool. And you kind of built these friendly rivalries as well, because you've been a part of each other's journey for so long. But sport just opens so many doors and just shows you the world, really.
And the second part to that question is you've identified, and we'll talk about a little bit later, some of those similarities between touch and flag and NFL, and another similarity is that there are two quite dominant nations in NFL, and it's very similar for us. Ours are Australia and New Zealand, and for you it's Canada and the US. So could you just tell us a little bit, when you come to a World, how you're going in and preparing for those games, and what's the mentality going up against two teams that are so dominant? And I know in the US's case, they're even dominant over Canada. I looked at some of those score lines from the finals of the Worlds, and the US just seemed on another planet.
Yeah, incredibly. They just have so much history of the sport, and the way that, they've been playing it from a young age and been watching it from a young age, and we're still really trying to figure it out a lot of times, and it'd be interesting to know, I guess, from your guys' perspective, we've had a lot of kind of quick upskilling in the sport, whereas I think there's a lot of gaps like in our learning, because we're just trying to get girls or to a certain level, which then gets kind of picked at when you play great teams like America and Canada. So, I think the big thing when you go against massive teams, powerhouse teams like that, is setting goals. So for us, we work in downs, like you have 4 attempts to get 10 yards. So, okay, we want to make sure that we convert on 3rd down every time. And that's because you still need to lead with a positive mindset. You still need to go in there, again, believing in yourself, and you want to be even better than that. But I think when you can kind of build yourself up and get these wins, you get the whole momentum going forwards with the team. And I think, we do go against these teams that might have bigger athletes, more powerful, whatever that may be. But I think the fact that if we can really rely on our fundamentals, which as a country we've been great at, because every year feels like we get lots of new people joining the sport. So we keep revisiting these fundamentals to the maximum ability. So for us, it's okay, well, what are our strengths and how can we schematically kind of smart them essentially? But consistency, we could run the same play 5 times in a row. If it's successful for us, keep doing it, right? Like we got to know what our identity is as a team and really buy into that. And I think that starts also with the head coach, the culture that's instilled, knowing who you are when you go into this, keeping that throughout the game as well. And I think it's always important to have a few good leaders on a team who are able to really pick people up or have kind of almost like key words that kind of remind you of quickly, okay, this is for this. But yeah, I think it does start with small goals to just start building that confidence throughout a game.
It's fantastic.
That's really inspirational. That gives us hope.
You'll be fine.
Go to our next World Cup. Yeah, so we've got our next World Cup in 2 years' time, in 2023. So we'll be taking your advice on board there. So Ben just mentioned that there are lots of similarities between touch and American football, and we kind of at the elite level will have more offensive teams and more defensive teams, play with similar ball handling skills, lines of running. We have quite predictable plays as well, and are able to run plays off that like you guys do. So I think there's probably lots of learnings we can take from each other. But are you able to tell us a little bit more about kind of the scene for American football over here in Great Britain, and also your non-contact version of American football, which is flag football?
Yeah, so I mean, really for us, I guess flag football is kind of like sevens essentially in terms of the quick speed of it, and also like touch, but in terms of Olympic opportunities, because fives or flag is just so much more manageable within the Olympics. That's the sport that we're looking to carry forward. So at the moment, we have our Worlds in October, and then the top 8 men's and women's teams who place there will then make it out to, they're calling it the Worlds again, in Alabama in the following year. And that's that kind of next stage to making it as an Olympic sport. And I think the interesting thing, and we kind of touched on this a bit earlier, is actually we don't get a lot of crossover between our contact players and our flag players, essentially. But the opportunities lie so much more within flag football for us, because there's far fewer barriers to playing, expense-wise, understanding the game. I know a lot of people on here who have watched American football. It's like start and stop. Nobody knows why people are running on and off. What's taking so long in this game? Whereas flag football really removes a lot of those barriers for people, and countries that potentially would not have been able to afford, all the helmets and shoulder pads now can participate in this level of the sport. And it also plays to disability as well, where we could have, forms of like a disability flag football too, or wheelchair flag football, which has been great. But within the UK, flag's probably been around for, I don't know, I want to say like 9 to 10 years in the UK. And contact used to be really big in the UK from the 80s, when they had they had Budweiser beer as a really big sponsor for them. And then it kind of died down when that all left. So now our women's game is growing and growing. And I think a lot of that is because, to be honest, we've gotten a lot of rugby players come over to us, contact rugby players that perhaps have peaked potentially in their game, within rugby, and maybe it's a bit more saturated at times. And they've decided they just want a new challenge, and they come over and play American football. And I think sometimes those players are almost bored, for lack of a better word, at first, because obviously in rugby, you're on offense, you're defense, you're running the whole time. But again, it's like comparing apples and oranges. They're two totally different sports. And I think once you really value the tactics of American football, then then you're like, okay, actually, I really enjoy this. I understand the team element of it. I guess just like touch as well, you probably get very similar crossover there too.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that tactical side of it, I think it takes a while for people to see that when they first come to the game, because I, often liken touch to playing chess, just at very high speed and very exhausting. but it is that tactical side of the game that you only start to peel back the layers of once you get into it a bit. On the superficial surface, it seems like quite a simple game, but as you start to play at the different levels, a whole new version of the game opens up, and I imagine it's very much like that for you guys too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I find even the culture of it is different. I find the culture within like touch or flag football, it's like its own community as opposed to contact. And truthfully, I love our flag football community. I love that we can play mixed. I love that we can, everyone can really enjoy themselves, and it's quick and it's fun, but you're still really competitive.
So just building on some of those similarities, and many people probably won't realize this that aren't familiar with the sport, at least in the UK, but you can actually play mixed in your sport at a high level as well, which is very similar to ours. And I think such a unique selling point in the sense that you can play at the top of the game in a mixed environment. So I wonder if you could just tell us a little bit about that and about the dynamic playing mixed team versus the women's team in your game. Yeah,
absolutely. And I've truthfully, as a player, I've loved playing on the mixed teams because I find I'm not trying to necessarily compete with a male athlete, but they do push me to be better or train harder because I know they're going to be faster than me. I know that I'm going to have to be way more fundamentally and technically sound than they are. And, for us, if we're throwing the football, like I'm going to have to be quick and that ball is going to come to me really fast. So I'm going to have much stronger hands, all these little things that add up. And I think you do definitely get that on a women's team. And we have some, incredible like freak athletes on our women's teams, which is awesome. But if you're not, especially with flag, if you're not on the same side of the football as them, you don't necessarily get to reap the benefits of them selfishly. So I think I love the idea that you can play mixed. I mean, crazy enough, in the UK, we also play contact mixed as well. So you could be running out there with your shoulder pads and helmets on against dudes as well. But I just think that it adds to the competitive level. Being honest again, a lot of men grow up with sport as an essential in their lives. And I think for a lot of females, we don't necessarily have that same upbringing. It's definitely changing now, but I think even that mindset is very different too, in terms of like how we view sport. And when you're working with people that, if I'd never been to an American football or a team practice before, and then I came into a new sport, well, if I have people there that have been there and done that, like if I have men that have grown up with that as the standard, they're going to be an example for me. And this is how I should act, or this is what we do next. And I think that's a really kind of subconscious part of it as well.
Yeah, I can't believe that you have full contact tackling in a mixed game. I think that is sensational. That is equality in action right there. Yeah, sounds a lot of fun. Well, we have you're part of our high performance wellness and wellbeing weekend this weekend. So thanks very much for kind of joining us for this, the first time that we've done this. And as part of one of the reasons why we've done this is because we've recruited some mental skills coaches recently, and they've been fundamental in having meetings with coaches, and kind of the predominant message that came out of those meetings was like a sense of a need for us to kind of wrap a big arms around our high performance community and just check in with each other, reconnect, and kind of like have a bit of a soft start to our high performance program starting again. And I was just wondering, what your experience is of working with sports psychologists, and what kind of benefits you found that they've brought to the games you've been involved in.
Yeah, and I think that's also another side of it. I love that you guys are doing that. You guys are ahead of the game in a lot of ways, which is incredible. And I think that sports psychologists and that kind of mental side of the game is something that's growing, and even more so at the elite level now. And we've been fortunate at GB to be able to have a sports psychologist on staff, but I found a really big difference with being in the NFL and having literally a full-time support staff, essentially. So we have our sports psychologist. We have essentially like a leadership mentor who the guys can go to at any time. We also have a chaplain. So spiritually, if anyone needs anything, he's there too on staff. So we're really hitting that kind of holistic viewpoint of, mental, social, physical, and emotional. And I think when you can really support an athlete in that holistic way, you just get more from them anyways, naturally. But, working with the sports psychologist, I think visualization is probably one of the biggest things I personally take from it. And I know our guys have really kind of bought into, and I use the word bought into because I think people hear that at first and they're like, oh, it's not real. It's whatever, but the power of your mind, it doesn't know if you've been there or not, and it's really, even for me as an athlete, for example, like throughout our lovely lockdown that we've had, I hate running, but we've been a bit limited with what we can do. And I found even running now, I will literally be running, visualizing that I'm on the field and almost, it sounds crazy, but like I'm competing. I'm like, I'm going to be the fastest linebacker out there. I'm going to, I imagine I'm like tracking down someone. And that's really powerful because you actually give a little bit more when you're doing things like that. And you're kind of pushing yourself a little bit more, especially when we're in a time that we don't physically have other people to necessarily compete against. And that kind of just reiterates the idea of that visualization and what it can do, because if we can prepare ourselves for a game, for a match, whatever that may be, and we can imagine it already, that when we get there, it already kind of takes out some of those nerves that we're feeling. But it also just makes you feel like this more sense of confidence and calm, and you can kind of just focus on what you need to focus on, as opposed to your environment or all the people you're around or whatever that may look like. So I just think that's a really big takeaway from us, and playing out what that winning touchdown looks, or what that winning try looks like. If you think about that enough, it will come to fruition. It will definitely happen, because in the back of your head, it's always going to be there.
What you said about when you were running doesn't sound crazy at all. It sounds absolutely spot on, because all I can think about when I'm running is that they haven't stopped playing and training much in Australia and New Zealand, so I got to run harder.
Yeah, exactly. But it powers you through.
Yeah, for sure.
Phoebe, I wonder if we could just touch on, and we'll sort of come back into the sort of well-being aspect in a moment as well. But I wonder if we could just touch on that sort of inclusivity to the approach of well-being that you referred to, in terms of, the sports psych there, the chaplain, trying to cover that holistic approach, and just give us a little bit of insight into your role as chair of the Inclusion Committee of the British American Football Association.
Yeah, definitely. And I think for us as a sport, this is the first time we've even had a Diversity and Inclusion Committee. So there's a lot that we can do for starters. It's exciting because there is so much potential for us. And I think it's important that if we look at sport on a whole, sport is incredible because it's almost like a snapshot of the world, in terms of within sport, you get people from such different backgrounds, from different cultures and upbringings, and you're bringing them all together and then asking them to work with each other. And I think we learn so much about the world through sport and through those kind of communication methods. And so when we then bring in the diversity and inclusion element side of things, a lot of times in sport, we're already doing that because we've got great athletes all coming together. It's the rest of the world that we have to worry about. But sport's so powerful where we can do that. We can really kind of change the world and change the way that people see the world. So for us as a committee, we want to make sure that we're supporting everyone within our community, but making real change and giving people real opportunities. So, making sure that our landscape does not all look the same in terms of our leadership. We want it to reflect our players. And I think even when you open up your talent pool like that, you've got so much more opportunity because, you've got diversity of thought because of their backgrounds, and you can really relate to your players or your community more. So making sure that, again, our kind of leadership does not all look the same. We don't want that. Our sport doesn't look like that. And making sure that, if females want to have a coaching pathway, that we're offering those opportunities. We're creating mentorship opportunities as well. That our LGBTQ plus community feels like they belong here, and they, even more than belong here, they take ownership of it, because sport gives us a place where we can feel safe and we can be ourselves. And we want to make sure that everyone has that opportunity. That's what especially grassroots sports offers us. It gives us a chance to be free, essentially. So for us, that's kind of like our underlying message, but it takes a lot of people to pull in the same direction. And, we know change isn't going to be overnight, but we're not going to stop pushing for change, and we're not going to stop, collaborating with other sports like touch and, soccer, whatever that may be, because even if we're just doing it in one sport, we're going to need everyone to do it across the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Very, very powerful indeed. So just loop back around to the sports psychs and sort of our wellness and well-being weekend. I wonder if you could give our athletes and our coaches a little bit of insight into sort of how you might promote that within your athletes when you're coaching, but I also think really importantly, how you ensure your well-being and mental health as an athlete as well.
Yeah, and those are both really great questions. In terms of my players, I think checking in with them, for starters, just reaching out to people, if that's the one thing this year has taught us, is the importance of community and reaching out and just saying, how are you? And I think even it's okay to not be okay. I think we've all kind of experienced that a lot. And it's actually kind of a positive thing now that people are feeling like they can say that. They don't have to say everything's great. And I think that's a really great start for us going forwards. And it makes us all more human. It makes us all more in touch with our emotions. So, for players, I want them to feel like they can talk to me. I also want them to feel like they have, teammates who perhaps they can relate with more. For a lot of my male players, I obviously know there's a lot that we won't have in common necessarily, but that doesn't mean I can't be a good support system for them. So just making sure and keeping tabs on all of that. Just like doing quizzes and, just making fun little things for us to do that kind of keep them engaged, because at first we were doing tons of Zoom calls and lots of X's and O's, and you almost go through, at least we went through this weird kind of phase where it was like, well, what are we working towards? What is our motivation right now? Because none of us are going to be able to have a game. And you kind of had this real drop in people. So, okay, well, how can we now re-engage you with the sport? Because we also don't want to lose people who potentially were new to the sport, but never really got the full opportunity to taste it and enjoy it and be energized by it. So you've got some really interesting elements of it in terms of the people side of it. And then I guess in terms of my own personal mental health side of things, and I think I learned most of this when I was coaching in the States, because we had such limited time and we're inside, sat down all day. I found that just being able to go to the gym or just go outside for a run or whatever that was 20 minutes just made me feel like a human again, and I think it's important you have really great people you work with, definitely. But for me, that was my kind of reset button, which was tough, because normally that's sport for me. Normally that was out playing, football. I'm sure you guys feel the same way in terms of your sport experiences, because, we talk about meditation. For me, playing football is meditation. That's my form of meditation, because it's the one opportunity where I can shut my brain off to the rest of the world. I only think about what's in front of me, the task at hand, or like you said earlier, Sammy, seeing red, whatever that looks like. But that was that's my one time when the world is quiet. And when I think, and that's also something people who are going from a player to coach experience too, that's a really hard transition, because you don't want to lose that side of it with your social side and all of that. But then you also are trying to put yourself in a position where, well, now I'm the coach now, and I'm going to tell you X, Y, and Z. So yeah, the mental health side of it for players, for coaches is so important. And knowing, we're all kind of pulling in the same direction together is key. I know I've seen those kind of quotes around where we're not necessarily in the same boat, but we are actually all going the same direction, and understanding everyone's circumstances are different.
That's amazing. Thank you.
Yeah, that is really insightful. I mean, I know those quotes like, "Oh, apart but not alone," I think really resonate with that sort of thing, and that's really kind of that was really interesting to hear. Thanks for that. So, kind of bringing us up to speed with the current day. You're over in the US at the moment. Do you want to just tell us kind of what you're up to at the moment and what's next for you, really, Phoebe?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm really excited. It's been great to be here. I'll be honest, I was only supposed to be here for a month, but because of lockdown in the UK, I extended my stay a little bit. But no, I've been here working with flag football, with our touch football. And we've had, so essentially for females, they're offering like college and university scholarships over here. So we've got 13 colleges on board that are offering scholarships for girls to play. And we had our first ever showcase, which was incredible. So we had 90 female athletes show up from across the US who all literally just gave their all. It was their first time having that sort of opportunity. And they were scouted. We had 12 of the 13 universities there, and they were all scouted. Film was sent to all the universities. So for us, that was really exciting and something that's going to double. So we'll have, 30 schools on board next year. We've also just started with a high school league. And now the NFL teams are getting involved in sponsoring and supporting alongside Nike to promote these opportunities for females to be able to play flag football. And it's just, it's so cool to be a part of. It's a bit surreal at times to think that, well, even last year they didn't have these opportunities, but definitely when I was a younger athlete, I wish that I could have had an opportunity to get an education and play a sport that I loved, and get a head start on all those life lessons that sport teaches you. But yeah, so just been out here. We've had different tournaments, which has been terrific. Making sure, just checking in on the kids and seeing how the youth teams are doing. But I fly back in a couple weeks, and then I've actually just signed with a football team out in Germany. So I'll be moving to Potsdam for this season, which is probably like a 6-month season, to go out there and coach in what we call the German Football League. So lots going on.
Wow, honestly, that is, you are so busy. I don't know how you manage to keep up with it all. So just kind of really as a last kind of question to finish on, and a trickier one for you, could you possibly kind of identify kind of the highs and the lows of your career so far, whether that be as an athlete or a coach? What kind of, we're all in a bit of a slump here at the moment and just starting to come out of it. It would be great to hear some learnings from you, and also obviously the highs too to finish on.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say probably the highs of my playing career. We had a game. We were in the European Championships in 2013. That's probably not the right year. 2015, and we'd one time played an 11-a-side game, and we went into that just knowing we were the underdogs. And I know a lot of people say they're underdogs, but that's when we were actually underdogs, because we'd never competed at that level. And we came in and we beat Germany, and they were like the powerhouse. They were almost out, like going out the night before, because they thought we were such a joke and we wouldn't even have an opportunity against them. And for us, we made it to the finals and completely lost to Finland in the finals. They dominated us. And for us, we were so excited. I think you would have thought we'd won the whole thing when we lost in that final, because we never thought that we would ever have gotten there. And every other team there was so excited for us. And I think that's the power of competition. That's, I think, something that's so specific to female sport, if I'm being honest, is how supportive females tend to be of each other, even if you're as competitors, the way that we all come together. But, I'll never forget that feeling, because we were a young team, but we were so passionate about what we were doing. And I think the heart that we brought to the table is what carried us through as much as possible. We'd never done a 10-day tournament before. And, there was a lot of learnings that happened throughout that. But 100%, like if it wasn't for the bond that we had as a team, there's no way I think we would have been as successful as we were. So that's always going to be, I think, a high in my head, overcoming that. And then I'll go high, low, high, so we don't end on a low.
That's a great story, though. I mean, what a trial against adversity. They must have been pretty complacent. I bet they were very surprised at the end of that. That sounds like, I would have loved playing a game like that.
I know, there's nothing to make you feel better like that. And then, I mean, I think the low is always going to be when I was coaching, when I really kind of felt like I lost a little belief in myself and was still unsure of my direction. And you ask yourself, I think it's important to know what your why is, no matter what you're doing. And I felt like I'd lost my why. We were definitely losing as a team as well. And that's really tough to be in the middle of a losing season. And I think I had a lot of like self-reflection, but I think also if I didn't have mentors in my life and people that I could really talk to and bounce ideas off of, that I probably wouldn't have, I don't really know what would have happened. I just probably would have been much more down on myself because I was also in a position where I had a very outward facing job. I sat in front of the head coach and our general manager, and I knew for them, they needed me to be the best that I could be every single day. And that's the expectation within elite sport. And I wanted to be positive and I wanted to bring that energy every single day. So it was kind of like I felt like a fraud essentially because I was presenting this person that was like loving life and it was great. But on the other side, I was like, what am I doing here? And I think that's probably a really tough battle. And I think something that a lot of us deal with and have been dealing with over the past year. So that's probably my low. And then we'll go back up to a high. My high in terms of my coaching career, I've had great opportunities, but I think there's probably two things to it. One, at the end of our season with the Bills, I was working with tight ends, and my coach basically said, okay, you've got the rookies, they're yours. Install the playbook. You make sure that they're going to be up to scratch, get them ready for OTAs, which is kind of like our preseason. And having someone give me that responsibility and have that much faith in myself was massive. And, there was definitely, I think we never really feel ready for that, but to have that at the highest level was pretty incredible for myself. And I think that part of it was, that's probably one of my highs. And I guess a little side story off of that is we have our big team meetings. So all of our players are in there, and we had one of our rookies come in, and we like routine in sports. So we always sit in the same seats all the time. And some rookie came in and sat in my seat. And I was just stood there, I wasn't going to make a fuss out of it. And the players were like, you got to get up. This is her seat. She's earned this. And that kind of feeling of acceptance carries so much weight. And so that's kind of the second part of that high for me.
Really,
that's amazing.
Very inspirational, Phoebe.
We've just got a question here that's come through to us in terms of your sort of multiple sport background as an athlete, and how you go about making decisions when those sports clash. So have you ever had to choose to prioritize, and how did you go about that?
Yeah, definitely. And we're starting to get better within the same sport, within American football. We're finally starting to have that communication and an overall schedule of the year. But it's previously not been like that. And the expectation was contact first. And I got to a point where I made a conscious decision where, and it's tough, right? I'm also captain of the contact team. So that carries a whole nother level of weight to it. But for me in that situation, I also knew that that flag is just as important as contact. And I think that there needs to be that equal opportunity given to flag. So at that time I had chosen flag. I do try and make it so that I can do both. I do try and do everything, I'll be honest. and make everyone happy that way at times. But I'm very confident in myself as a contact player. I'm also very confident in my teammates within contact, and that we've got some really great leaders. And I know our flag team is a lot younger, to be honest with you. So where am I going to have the most positive influence at that time, or where could I be needed more? And for me, that was going to be a flag decision. But I know it's not always going to be that straightforward for people. I'm not saying that was straightforward, but you will have to make those decisions. And I think it comes down to like where you're personally needed more, where your personal development is needed more. And then perhaps leading up to competitions, that kind of going through that checklist of, all right, well, what becomes the most important, and being almost very like factual about it, because when you start putting your personal like emotional twist on it, you might not always see things as clearly.
Yeah, really interesting. And another one's just come through. So during an NFL season, how hard is it to maintain an on-field identity as a team when the X's and O's change so much from week to week?
Yeah, and that's a really interesting question, because I think also so repeated messaging is going to be your key no matter what. Always making sure that the guys know what our team is about, almost quizzing them about what that team is about. And the X's and O's, they do change, but you should still be pulling from what you believe in, which is what your identity is in the beginning of the season. So if I'm creating an offensive playbook in the beginning of season saying this is who we're going to be, we have our philosophy as well, that the guys know and we all know as a team. If I've given all that in the beginning of the season and now I'm halfway through the season and I'm veering off of that path, well, A, why did you not believe in yourself in the beginning? And why are you changing it now? And sometimes we actually need to genuinely have those conversations. We need to talk with our coordinators and say, look, this is what you said you wanted to be. And now look at us. Now this is not what we are. So that self-reflection, I think, is so key, a part of any sport, to make sure that we're always reviewing, we're always looking back and making sure that we're sticking to that. And I think that's probably the best way to answer that question.
That's fantastic, really, yeah. And I think strong similarities to what we might look at as well in our sport too. So no, that's brilliant. Look, Phoebe, thank you so much for your time this morning over there and this afternoon over here. We've had a great day, and this really has just made the day so much more special to hear about your experiences, your background, but also I think the people who've watched today and will rewatch as well will have taken so much from this in terms of inspiration, but also just some guidance as well on whether that be on their elite pathway as an athlete or as a coach. So we really appreciate your time. We hope that this is a relationship we can continue as well. And yeah, good luck with the travel back to the UK, and good luck for the new job over in Potsdam as well.
Thank you guys so much. It's been so lovely to speak with you both, and we'll definitely have a cross-sport day in the future.
Yeah, don't you worry. I've been speaking to Russell Enshaw about maybe booking you into one of our high performance camps when you're back over here. So I'm sure this is the start of a beautiful relationship between touch rugby and American football or flag football.
I'm so excited. Thank you so much.
That's great. Good. Thank you, Phoebe. Thank you to everyone who's taken the time to watch and listen in this afternoon. And yeah, have a good afternoon.